Welcome back to abettersociety.info. This is the 9th regular video and the 5th in a series dealing with what we're calling the hunter-gatherer societal pattern. In this video we want to spend some time talking about population. And we want to talk about population in two different ways. The first one has to do with numbers, and the second one has to do with the makeup of the population. The makeup of the people themselves. And hunter-gatherers had various different mechanisms to influence these factors. The first thing having to do with population and numbers is based upon the fact that people are only going to be able to control a certain piece of land. And if it's a really good piece of land, then they're going to be able to have more people in their group. But if it's a piece of land that's fairly sparse, then they're not going to be able to have as many. So somehow or the other, they have to keep their numbers based upon how much resources they have. And they had various different mechanisms to accomplish that. Now, in the area where we live here in the southeastern corner of Tidewater, Virginia, the Native Americans who lived here, what was called the common pronunciation is the Powhatan tribal groups. The real pronunciation of that is the Powhatans. And you'll hear me using Powhatan because I grew up in Oklahoma, and that's the way we always learned to say that word. But in the area that they controlled, which was from Washington, D.C. down to here, they could only support 13 or 14,000 people. Today there are, millions of people who live in this area. And these people had agriculture. I mean, they could grow crops. They didn't have much in the line of animal husbandry, so they were in a transition stage from being purely hunter-gatherers to being people who had agriculture, and which they did have, but they had no animal husbandry. And so, thousands of years earlier, when they didn't have any agriculture, then they wouldn't be able to support even that many people. The second factor has to do with makeup. In a society that lives in this way is going to have warriors. And they're going to have strong people, both men and women. But the warrior factor we seem to have more information about, because there were various different ways to ensure that they had big, strong people, big, strong guys who could beat up on other big, strong guys of other groups who was trying to take their land. So, what were some of these mechanisms? Well, one of them was that in the people who lived here, the guy who was really good at hunting, was a great warrior, he was allowed to have more wives. So the gene pool was going to be enhanced by the big guys because they could have more wives, and therefore they're going to have more children. Other hunter-gatherer societies had mechanisms for castrating some males, and undoubtedly they're not going to castrate the big guys. They're going to castrate the younger ones, the weak ones. And there were other ways of trying to ensure that they had big guys. It's traditionally known that these types of warrior people were bigger. I mean, when the English came here, the English were small. I mean, John Smith was a little guy, and the Native Americans he found here were big guys. And so there had to be different ways to ensure that you had big guys. One of the things that's found in a lot of these groups of people are initiations, ordeals that boys have to go through, and if they cannot successfully complete the ordeals, then they may not be allowed to marry at all. And here with the local Native Americans, although they had agriculture, they were in a transition between pure hunter-gatherers and people who had both agriculture and animal husbandry. They had a process called the Hushkana. It was an ordeal. It lasted 9 months. And when the first Englishman documented the Hushkana, the guy's name was William Strachey, S-T-R-A-C-H-E-Y. He documented it as an annual event that he was told was a child sacrifice. But the Hushkana outcome was that the strongest boys would be the ones that would survive the ordeal. They went through a ritualistic funeral ceremony for them before they embarked on the 9 months of the ordeal. Part of the ordeal was that they were given a narcotic that drove them nuts. I mean, they lost their mind. And the old warriors who put them through this had to put them up in a Hushkana cage in order to keep them from just running off and being totally out of their mind. And there was another factor in this, is that when you came out of the Hushkana, then you were a warrior. And there had to be a complete dedication to the warrior society. And childhood was seen as a weakness. And the 9 months of the Hushkana was seen as a transition of life from the weakness of the child to the strength of the man and the strength of the warrior. And a young guy who came out of it could not show recognition of his previous family during childhood, because in a lot of societies like this, childhood was seen as a weakness. And so if a guy came out of the Hushkana as a warrior and he recognized his mother, for example, then they're going to put him back through the Hushkana and he's not going to survive. So there had to be this dedication to the warrior. So what we're saying here is that people who were in the hunter-gatherer societies had ways of controlling their population. They controlled them in terms of numbers so that they wouldn't have too many people. I mean, if you have too many people, then a lot more people are going to starve to death. And then you also need the proper makeup. You had to have strong people. If somebody was born, a child was born with obvious handicap, then that child's probably going to be killed. And that was just the reality. I mean, it's not that these are bad people. They're people who are trying to make a living. They're trying to survive in a harsh environment without the technology that we understand today. They didn't have animal husbandry. They didn't have farming. And so they had to make a living the best way they could. And by controlling their population in terms of number and makeup, then they were able to survive. So I'm going to cut this off, and we'll move on to our next video a little later. Talk to you later. Bye.